A little girl ran into a diner and hid beneath a Hell's Angels table. Moments later, her stepfather stormed in, looking for her. The rain came down hard. It hit the highway in thick sheets, bouncing off the asphalt like tiny silver coins. The kind of rain that soaked through everything. The kind that made the whole world feel gray and cold and very, very empty. Jack Morgan didn't slow down. He kept his big hands steady on the handlebars of his motorcycle, leaning slightly forward the way a man does when he has been riding so long that the bike feels like part of his own body. His leather vest was soaked clean through. The patches on the back, the ones that told the world exactly who he was and where he belonged, were dark with rain. Water ran down his neck and underneath his collar. His boots were wet. His jeans were wet. Even the silver rings on his fingers felt cold as ice. But Jack kept riding. He was a big man. Broad shoulders, a thick gray and black beard that covered most of his jaw. His arms were covered from wrist to elbow in tattoos, faded some from years in the sun, but still bold enough to make people step back when they saw them up close. He had deep brown eyes that didn't miss much, a face that had seen hard weather, hard roads, and harder years. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. To anyone watching from the side of the highway, he looked exactly like the kind of man you didn't ask questions of, the kind of man you gave plenty of room. Most people crossed the street when they saw Jack Morgan coming. He had stopped being bothered by that a long time ago. Or at least, that's what he told himself. The truth was quieter than that. The truth lived somewhere in his chest, in that hollow space that had been there for going on 6 years now. Ever since Carol died. Ever since he came home one afternoon to a house that was too still, and a phone message from the hospital, and a life that stopped making sense the way it used to. They never had kids. They had always talked about it. Someday, they said. When the time is right, they said. And then the time ran out before they ever got around to it. And now Jack rode alone on wet highways through gray afternoons, and the word someday didn't mean anything to him anymore. The road was easier than the house. Out here there was nothing to remind him of what was missing. No empty chair at the kitchen table. No quiet that felt too quiet. Just the engine underneath him, the rain around him, and the long white lines of the highway disappearing beneath his tires one after another. He had been riding for 3 days. He wasn't going anywhere in particular. He was just going. The sign appeared through the rain like a dim yellow light at the end of a dark hallway. Small block letters, a little crooked. Mary's Diner, hot coffee, hot food, all welcome. A gravel lot sat beside it, half empty, with 2 pickup trucks and an old sedan parked near the door. Jack pulled in. He sat for a moment on his bike after cutting the engine, rain drumming on his shoulders, looking at the diner through the foggy window. Warm light glowed from inside. He could see the shape of people at the counter. Steam rising from a coffee pot. A ceiling fan turning slow. He pulled off his helmet and ran a hand through his wet hair. Just coffee, he thought. Get warm for a few minutes, then keep moving. He pushed through the front door. The little bell above it rang once, and just like that, every head in the diner turned. A woman behind the counter froze with a coffee pot in her hand. A man in a booth near the window stopped chewing. 2 women at a corner table leaned close to each other and said something low and quiet between them. Jack didn't react. He had a long practice of not reacting. He moved to an empty corner table, pulled out the chair, and sat down. He set his helmet on the seat beside him. He folded his big tattooed hands on the tabletop and looked out the rain-streaked window. And he waited for someone to bring him a cup of coffee. A woman named Mary brought his coffee without being asked twice. She was a stout woman, maybe 60 or so, with silver hair pinned up loose and kind eyes behind a pair of reading glasses she wore pushed halfway down her nose. She set the mug down in front of Jack with a steady hand and didn't flinch when she looked at him. That alone made him like her. "Cream or sugar?" she asked. "Black is fine," he said. "Thank you." She gave him one short nod and headed back to the counter. Jack wrapped both hands around the warm mug and looked out the window. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it had gotten heavier, streaking down the glass in long, crooked lines, blurring the gravel lot outside into a gray smear. His motorcycle sat alone near the edge of the lot. Rain bounced off the seat. He sipped his coffee. It was good. Strong and hot and real, the kind of coffee that tasted like someone actually cared about making it right. He let out a slow breath through his nose and felt some of the cold finally start to loosen its grip on his shoulders. The diner had settled back into its quiet rhythm. The two women at the corner table had gone back to their food. The man by the window was reading a folded newspaper now. Mary was humming something soft behind the counter while she wiped down the pie display with a clean cloth. A cook moved around behind the kitchen window, pans clinking, something sizzling on the flat top. It was the kind of place that felt like it had been there forever and would be there long after everything else changed. Worn counter stools, laminated menus tucked behind the napkin holders, little ceramic salt and pepper shakers shaped like chickens. A handwritten sign above the register that said, "We don't do fancy here, but we do it right." Jack read the sign twice. He sipped his coffee again. Outside, a car passed slowly on the wet highway, its headlights cutting through the gray. Then it was gone. Then there was just the rain again, steady and soft against the glass. Jack was thinking about nothing in particular. That was the one thing riding always did for him. It emptied him out, cleared away all the noise inside his head until there was nothing left but the present moment. This cup of coffee, this table, this rain. It was enough, he told himself. It had to be enough. Then the doors burst open. The little bell above them didn't just ring. It swung hard and hit the doorframe with a sharp crack. Every head in the diner snapped up at the same time. A little girl came running in. She was small, couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. She had dark, tangled hair plastered to the sides of her face from the rain, and she was barefoot, her small feet leaving wet prints on the worn linoleum floor. Her dress was light blue with small white flowers on it, soaked through and clinging to her thin arms. She was shaking. But it was her eyes that Jack noticed first. Wide and dark and full of something that no child's eyes should ever have to hold. She wasn't just scared the way a kid gets scared of thunder or the dark. This was different. This was the kind of fear that comes from something real. She looked behind her at the door. Then she looked around the diner fast, taking everything in at once, the way a small animal does when it needs somewhere to go and needs to find it right now. Her eyes landed on Jack's table. Maybe it was the long tablecloth that hung down on both sides. Maybe it was the corner. Maybe she just ran out of other choices. Jack didn't know. But she crossed the diner in about 4 quick steps and dropped straight to her knees and crawled under his table without saying a single word. Jack felt her press herself against his boots. She was trembling. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He set his coffee mug down slowly and looked at the door. 3 seconds later, a man walked in. He was tall, broad across the chest, with short dark hair and a jaw that looked like it was clenched tight enough to crack. He wore a canvas work jacket and muddy boots, and his eyes swept the room the moment he stepped inside. Hard eyes, quick eyes. "Hey," the man said. His voice was loud and carried easily across the whole diner. Anybody see a little girl come in here? The diner went still. Not quiet the way it had been before. This was a different kind of still. The kind where everyone stops chewing and nobody wants to be the first one to speak. The man stepped further inside. Water dripped off the shoulders of his canvas jacket and made a small, dark puddle on the floor beneath him. His eyes moved fast around the room, checking every face, every corner. Mary set down her cloth slowly behind the counter. I said, "Has anyone seen a little girl?" The man's voice was calmer now, but the edge was still there underneath it. He pulled it back just enough to sound reasonable, just enough to sound like a worried parent. The two women at the corner table looked at each other. The man with the newspaper had folded it shut and was watching without a word. "She's my stepdaughter," the man said. He put one hand on his chest, like he was explaining something perfectly normal. "Her name is Emma. 8 years old, dark hair. She does this sometimes. Runs off." He shook his head slowly, like he was embarrassed about it, apologizing to the room before anyone could question him. "She's got some behavioral stuff going on. It scares people who don't know her. I'm sorry if she upset anyone." He smiled then. Just a small one. The kind that was meant to put everyone at ease. It didn't put Jack at ease. He noticed the way the man's eyes kept scanning, still working the room even while his mouth was being friendly. Like the smile and the searching were two different things happening at the same time. Mary stepped out from behind the counter. She moved slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "Well now," she said. Her voice was steady. "Why don't you tell me your name and we can sort all this out?" "Darren," he said. "Darren Whitmore." "All right, Darren." Mary folded her hands in front of her. "What happened?" "I told you what happened." A small crack in the patience now. He caught it and smoothed it back over. "She ran from the truck. She does this when she doesn't get her way. She's a good kid, but she's got a real problem with running, and if somebody here saw her, I just need to know where she went so I can get her home safe." He looked around the room again. The woman nearest the window shifted in her seat. Her eyes drifted just for a half-second toward the far corner of the diner. Toward Jack's table. Darren followed it. He crossed the floor without hurrying. His boots were heavy on the linoleum. When he got close enough, he looked down at Jack the way some men do when they want to seem bigger than they are. Jack didn't look away. "You seen a little girl come through here?" Darren asked. Jack picked up his coffee mug, took a slow sip, set it down again. "Yep," he said. Darren straightened slightly. "Where'd she go?" Jack looked up at him then. Not with anger, not with anything loud. Just a flat, even look that didn't move. "I'm not sure that's the right question," Jack said. Darren blinked. "Excuse me?" "Little girl runs into a diner in the rain with no shoes on." Jack kept his voice low and unhurried. "Shaking like a leaf. That kind of scare doesn't come from a tantrum." He tilted his head slightly. "So before anybody goes anywhere, I think it makes more sense to figure out what she's scared of." Darren's jaw tightened. "She's scared because she ran out in the rain. She gets confused and works herself up." "Maybe so," Jack said. He did not move. He did not look under the table. He did not look down at his boots where he could feel the small warmth of a frightened little girl still pressed against them, still shaking, still waiting to find out if the world was going to hand her back. He just held Darren's stare and waited. Darren stood there for another moment. His eyes moved over the table, over the empty bench seat across from Jack, over the floor. Then Mary's voice cut through. "Can I get you something, hun?" Coffee, maybe? Looks like you've had a rough evening." It was perfectly timed, warm and casual, like she was just doing her job. Darren turned toward her, and the shift gave Jack exactly the window he needed. He dropped his hand beneath the table. Not reaching, not grabbing, just letting it rest there, open, near the edge of the seat. A small signal. The same way you might hold out your hand to a stray animal to show it you meant no harm. He felt Emma go still. Then, very quietly, Jack leaned forward just slightly and spoke toward the floor. His voice was barely above a whisper, soft and even, like he was talking about nothing important at all. "You doing okay down there?" Silence for a second. Then a tiny voice came back. "No. Didn't think so." He kept his hand where it was. "My name's Jack. What's yours?" Another pause. "Emma. Emma." He said it like it mattered, because it did. "You ran a long way in the rain with no shoes on. That tells me something was really wrong. Not just a little wrong, really wrong." She didn't answer right away. He could hear her breathing, small, shaky breaths. "He's going to say I'm lying," she whispered. "Maybe he will," Jack said. "But I want to hear it from you first. What happened?" The sound of Darren's voice floated across the diner. He was talking to Mary now, explaining himself again, smoothing things over with that careful, practiced tone. Jack didn't look up. He kept his eyes on his coffee mug and his attention entirely on the little girl beneath his table. "I wasn't being bad," Emma said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "I know he's going to say I was, but I wasn't." "I believe you," Jack said simply. That seemed to shift something in her. He heard a small rustling sound, like she had adjusted herself, getting a little more comfortable, deciding, maybe just barely, to trust him. "I found something," she whispered. "In his truck, in the back, under the seat. He doesn't know I know about it." Jack's hand stayed still. "What did you find?" "An envelope." Her voice dropped even lower. "It had pictures in it, and papers, old ones." She stopped. "There was a picture of my mom." Jack kept his expression calm. He took another slow sip of coffee, giving her time. "I thought my mom left," Emma continued. "Darren always said she didn't want us anymore. He said she found a different life and she wasn't coming back." Her voice went very small. "He said she left because of me." Jack said nothing. He let her keep going. "But the picture in the envelope..." Emma swallowed hard. "She was holding a sign, like a piece of paper she wrote on, and it had my name on it." A shaky breath. "And there were letters. I couldn't read all the words, but I could read some. She wrote my name a lot. She kept writing my name." Jack set his mug down carefully. His chest felt tight in a way he hadn't expected. "Did you bring the envelope with you?" he asked. A pause. "I have it," Emma whispered. "I put it in my jacket before I ran. He doesn't know." Jack looked up slowly across the diner. Darren was still at the counter, his back mostly turned, still talking, still performing. His hands moved while he spoke, the gestures of a reasonable man telling a simple story. Jack looked back down at his hand resting near the edge of the table. He thought about the envelope, about letters with a little girl's name written over and over by someone who was supposed to be gone, about a photograph of a mother holding up proof that she remembered. He had to see what was in that envelope before anyone went anywhere. He was sure of that now. Jack waited until Darren's attention was fully on Mary. The man was still talking, still explaining, still spinning his story about a troubled child who needed discipline and understanding. Then Jack spoke quietly towards the floor. "Emma, I need you to do something for me. Can you hand me that envelope?" A pause. Then a rustle of fabric. A small hand appeared at the edge of the bench, clutching a wrinkled manila envelope that had been folded in half to fit inside a child's jacket. Jack took it carefully. He set it on the table beside his coffee mug and rested his hand on top of it, covering it from view. Mary appeared at his side a moment later. She had moved away from Darren, leaving him at the counter with a fresh cup of coffee and a sympathetic smile that bought them time. She slid into the booth across from Jack without asking. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were sharp. "Let me see," she said quietly. Jack glanced toward the counter. Darren had his phone out now, scrolling through something, distracted. The other customers had gone back to their meals, the tension in the room easing just slightly. Jack opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, letters, and documents that had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases had worn thin. The first photograph showed a woman in her early 30s. She had dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail and kind eyes that looked tired. She was standing outside a courthouse, holding a handmade sign written in black marker on white poster board. The sign read, "Emma Carter, I am your mother. I never stopped looking for you." Mary sucked in a breath. Jack stared at the photograph. The woman's face was open and raw with emotion. This was not someone who had walked away. This was someone who had been searching. He set the photograph down and reached for the letters. There were 6 of them, all addressed to Emma Carter, all written in careful handwriting that someone had taken time with, like every word mattered. The first one was dated 4 years earlier. "Dear Emma, I don't know if you will ever get this letter. I don't know where you are or if Darren will let you read it. But I need you to know that I never left you. I would never leave you. Something happened that I still don't understand. But I promise I am fighting to find you. I love you more than anything in the world. Mom." Jack's jaw tightened. He set the letter down and picked up another. This one was dated 3 years earlier, then another from 2 years ago. Each one said the same thing in different ways. "I didn't leave. I'm still looking. I love you." Mary picked up one of the documents. It was a photocopy of a police report. She scanned it quickly, her fingers tracing the lines of text. "This says Rachel Carter filed a missing persons report," Mary said quietly, "for her daughter Emma, 4 years ago." She looked up at Jack. She reported Emma missing. Jack felt something cold settle in his chest. "Darren told Emma her mother abandoned her," he said. "And he told Rachel that Emma was gone." Mary's voice was steady, but her hand shook slightly as she set the paper down. "He made them both think the other one didn't want to be found." Jack picked up another document. This one was a letter from a family court. It referenced custody arrangements and a hearing that had been scheduled but never attended. There was a note scrawled at the bottom in pen. "Respondent failed to appear. Case dismissed." "He kept her from going to court," Jack said. His voice was flat. "Rachel tried to get custody back, and he made sure she couldn't." Mary pressed her hand to her mouth. Her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. Beneath the table, Emma's small voice spoke up. "Is that my mom?" she whispered. "In the picture?" Jack looked down at the photograph again, at the woman holding the sign with Emma's name written on it, at the desperate hope in her eyes. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's her." "She didn't leave me?" Jack felt his throat tighten. "No, kiddo," he said. "She never left you. She's been looking for you this whole time." Emma didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she started to cry. Quiet, shaking sobs that she tried to muffle against her knees. Jack looked across the table at Mary. Her face was set now, determined. "We're not letting that man take her," Mary said. Jack nodded once. No, he agreed. We're not. Jack slid the documents back into the envelope and tucked it inside his jacket. He looked at Mary. Keep him talking, Jack said quietly. I need to make a call. Mary nodded. She stood and walked back towards the counter, her warm smile returning like a mask she could put on and take off at will. Jack waited until she was between him and Darren before he reached down beneath the table. Emma, he said softly, I need you to stay right here. Don't move unless I tell you to. Understand? A small hand touched his boot, just for a second. Then it pulled back. Okay, she whispered. Jack stood and walked toward the back hallway where the restrooms were. He passed Darren without looking at him. The man was still scrolling through his phone, his coffee cooling on the counter in front of him. Jack pushed through the door, marked restrooms, and found himself in a narrow hallway with peeling linoleum and a flickering overhead light. There was a payphone on the wall that looked like it hadn't worked in 20 years. He pulled out his cell phone. The documents had included Rachel Carter's contact information, a phone number written at the bottom of one of the letters in the same careful handwriting. Jack stared at it for a moment, memorizing the digits. Then he dialed. The phone rang twice before someone picked up. Hello? A woman's voice, breathless, guarded. Rachel Carter? Jack asked. A pause. Who is this? My name is Jack Morgan. I'm calling because I'm sitting in a diner about 30 miles outside Greenfield and your daughter Emma is hiding under my table. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. Emma. Rachel's voice broke. You have Emma. Is she okay? Is she hurt? She's scared, Jack said. But she's safe, for now. Oh my God. Rachel was crying. Jack could hear it in the way her words came out uneven and shaking. Oh my God. Where is she? Is Darren there? Did he hurt her? Darren's here, Jack said. He came in looking for her. Says she's his stepdaughter and she runs away sometimes. That's a lie. Rachel's voice turned sharp, furious. He took her from me 4 years ago. He told me she was gone and he told her I didn't want her anymore. I've been searching for her ever since. Jack leaned his shoulder against the wall. The hallway smelled like old grease and disinfectant. I found the letters, he said, and the court documents. Emma had them in an envelope she was carrying. Rachel made a sound, somewhere between a sob and a laugh. She found them, she said. I've been leaving them everywhere I could think of. Places I thought he might take her. Places she might go. I didn't know if she would ever see one. She saw them, Jack said, and she ran. Is she really okay? Rachel asked. Her voice was quieter now, desperate. Please tell me she's okay. She's okay, Jack said, scared, confused, but she's not hurt. Don't let him take her. Rachel's words came fast now, urgent. Please, I'm begging you, don't let him take her. He'll disappear again and I won't be able to find her. Jack closed his eyes. He thought about the little girl under the table, about the way she had looked at him with those wide, terrified eyes and trusted him to keep her safe. I won't, he said. I'm 2 hours away, Rachel said. Maybe less if I drive fast. I can be there before dark. Just keep her safe until I get there. Please. Where are you now? Jack asked. I'm in Millbrook. I was following a lead someone gave me about Darren being seen near Greenfield. I've been driving through every town in the area for weeks. Jack opened his eyes. He looked down the hallway toward the diner. He could see Mary through the narrow window in the door. She was laughing at something Darren had said, playing her part. What's the address? Rachel asked. Tell me where you are. Jack gave her the name of the diner and the highway mile marker. She repeated it back to him twice, like she was afraid she would forget. I'm coming right now, she said. I'm leaving right now. Just don't let him take her. Please, I can't lose her again. You won't, Jack said. His voice was steady, certain. I promise you, I'm not letting anyone take her." Rachel let out a shaking breath. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Jack ended the call and stood in the hallway for a moment. He looked at his phone. Then he put it back in his pocket and walked back into the diner. Darren was still at the counter. Mary was refilling his coffee. Jack sat back down at the booth. He could see Emma's small shape beneath the table, curled up tight against the bench. "Your mom's coming?" Jack said quietly. "She'll be here soon?" Emma didn't say anything, but Jack felt her hand touch his boot again. This time, it stayed there. The rain came down harder as the evening stretched into night. Mary had flipped the diner sign to closed an hour ago. She did it quietly, without making a big deal of it. Just walked to the door, turned the sign around, and pulled the blinds halfway down. A couple of the remaining customers had left after that, offering nervous smiles and glances toward the booth where Jack sat. One older man had squeezed Mary's shoulder on his way out. "You call me if you need anything," he said. Mary had patted his hand and told him she would. Now it was just the three of them inside. Jack, Mary, and Emma, who had finally come out from under the table and was sitting beside Jack in the booth, her knees pulled up to her chest, her small, socked feet tucked beneath her. She had lost her shoes somewhere along the way. Mary had brought her a grilled cheese sandwich and a glass of milk without being asked, setting them down gently like she was afraid sudden movements might startle her. Emma had eaten half the sandwich. That felt like a good sign. Outside, Darren paced the parking lot. He had been asked to leave the diner after his voice got too loud. Mary had done it with a calm smile and a firm tone that left no room for argument. Darren had gone, but he had not gone far. Jack could see him through the window, moving back and forth in the yellow glow of the parking lot light, his breath making small clouds in the cold air. Every few minutes he would stop and look at the diner. "He's still out there," Emma said softly. She was not looking at the window. She was staring at the table. "I know," Jack said. "Is he going to come back in?" "Not if Mary has anything to say about it." Mary, who was wiping down the counter nearby, looked over and gave Emma a small nod. "That man's not setting one foot back inside my diner tonight. I promise you that, sweetheart." Emma turned the edge of her paper napkin between her fingers, folding it, unfolding it, folding it again. Then the sound of Darren's voice cut through the rain, loud enough to hear through the glass. "I have legal rights over that child. You people are interfering with a legal custody arrangement." Jack did not move. He kept his eyes on Emma. "He's been saying that for 20 minutes, Mary said, her voice flat. "He can say it 20 more times if he wants. Doesn't make it true." Outside, Darren was speaking to someone on his phone now. His free hand was pointing at the diner. His face was red even in the dim light. "He told Tom I was the dangerous one," Jack said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Mary let out a short sound that was almost a laugh. "Tom Reynolds has known dangerous men." He didn't look too convinced. Tom had stopped by an hour ago, just off duty, still in his jacket with the old badge clip on the belt. He had listened to Darren's version of events with the patient, unreadable expression of a man who had spent 30 years deciding who was telling the truth. Then he had walked inside, spoken to Jack for 10 minutes, looked at the documents, and made his own phone calls. He had not handed Emma over. That said enough. Jack was still thinking about the documents when Emma spoke again. "There was a name on one of the papers," she said. Her voice was careful, like she was testing the words before she said them. I saw it when I was hiding in Darren's truck, before I ran." Jack looked at her. "What kind of name?" Emma unfolded the napkin one more time, smoothed it flat with her palm. "It was a lady from my school," she said. "Miss Parker. She was my counselor. She was always nice to me." Emma paused. "Her name was on one of Darren's papers, the ones with the stamps on them, the ones that said my mom gave me up." Jack went very still. "Linda Parker?" he said. Emma nodded slowly. "She signed them, right at the bottom, her name and her work stamp." She looked up at Jack with eyes that were confused and hurting at the same time. "Why would she do that? She was supposed to help me." Jack had no easy answer for that. He looked down at the envelope tucked inside his jacket. Then he looked back at Emma, at this small girl who had trusted a counselor to protect her, and instead found that woman's signature on the papers that had taken her mother away. The lie was not just Darren's. It had roots. The morning came in quietly. Gray light crept through the diner windows and settled across the floor in long, pale strips. The rain had finally stopped sometime before dawn, leaving the parking lot wet and shining. Birds were starting up somewhere outside, small sounds in the stillness. Emma was asleep in the corner booth. Mary had made her a bed of sorts the night before, 2 folded tablecloths for a mattress, a clean apron for a pillow, a soft fleece blanket from the lost and found box that had never been claimed. It was not much, but Emma had curled into it without complaint and fallen asleep faster than Jack expected. She had been more tired than she let on. Jack had not slept much. He had dozed in the booth across from her for a few hours, one eye open, listening to the parking lot. Darren had eventually driven away around midnight. Tom had made sure of it. Now Jack stood at the diner counter with Mary, the two of them moving quietly so they would not wake Emma. Mary cracked eggs into a bowl. Jack worked the toaster and kept the coffee going. Nobody had asked him to help. He had just gotten up and started doing it, and Mary had handed him the bread without a word. "She likes her eggs soft," Mary said, keeping her voice low. "Not runny. Soft." Jack looked at her. "How do you know that?" "Because she told me last night when I brought her the sandwich. She said eggs are her favorite breakfast, but only when they are not too wiggly." Mary smiled at the bowl. "Wiggly, that was her word." Jack almost smiled himself. He poured a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching Emma sleep. She looked peaceful now. Nothing like the terrified child who had crawled under his table the evening before. Her hair had dried in small, loose waves around her face. One hand was tucked under her cheek. The other hand rested near the edge of the tablecloth, fingers relaxed and open. She was just a little girl. That was the thing that kept hitting Jack in the chest every time he looked at her. She was just a little girl who deserved a warm house and a school backpack and someone who remembered how she liked her eggs. He took a slow sip of coffee. "Rachel should be close," Mary said. Jack nodded. He had spoken to Rachel on the phone the night before. She had answered on the first ring, her voice thin and careful like someone who had learned not to hope too hard. When Jack told her Emma was safe, there had been a long silence before she made a sound that was not quite a word, just something broken and relieved all at once. She had been driving since before sunrise. 2 hours away, Rachel Carter gripped the steering wheel with both hands and watched the road unspool in front of her. The morning was pale and cool. Mist still sat in the low fields along the highway. Her coffee had gone cold in the cup holder an hour ago, and she had not touched it since. She kept telling herself to breathe. She had imagined this moment so many times over the years that it had started to feel like something that only existed in her head. A dream she kept returning to, but could never quite reach. Emma's face, the sound of her voice, the way she used to press her forehead against Rachel's arm when she was sleepy. Emma had been 6 the last time Rachel saw her. She was 8 now. 2 years. 2 years that Rachel had spent filing paperwork and making phone calls and knocking on doors that never opened. 2 years of being told her daughter was fine and she needed to move on. 2 years of not moving on. Her eyes burned. She blinked hard and focused on the road. Just drive. Just get there. A green sign appeared on the right side of the highway. Millhaven. 14 miles. Rachel exhaled. Her hands tightened on the wheel. She pressed down on the gas just a little bit more. Back at the diner, Emma stirred. She sat up slowly, blinking at the light, looking around like she needed a moment to remember where she was. Then her eyes landed on Jack at the counter, and her shoulders dropped with relief. "Morning," Jack said. Emma rubbed her face. "Is he still out there?" "No, he's gone." She nodded, taking that in. Then she looked around at the empty diner, at the clean tables, at Mary standing at the stove with a spatula, at the quiet morning outside the windows. "It smells good," she said. "Eggs," Mary said. "Soft ones." Emma looked at her. Then a small, real smile crossed her face. The first one Jack had seen from her. She climbed out of the booth and padded over in her socked feet and settled onto one of the counter stools. Mary set a glass of orange juice in front of her. Emma wrapped both hands around it like it was something precious. They ate together at the counter, the 3 of them, eggs and toast and orange juice, while the morning got a little brighter outside. Jack did not say much. He did not need to. Emma was eating. That was enough. The sound of tires on wet gravel came about 40 minutes later. Emma heard it before Jack did. Her head lifted. She turned toward the window and watched a small blue car pull into the parking lot and stop near the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the car door opened. A woman stepped out. She was thin, with dark hair pulled back from her face, wearing a gray jacket over a plain shirt. She stood still for a second, with her hand on the car door, looking at the diner like she was not sure she was allowed to walk toward it. Emma slid off the stool. She stood very still, staring through the window. The woman outside looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. Rachel made a sound that Jack could hear even from inside. Her hand came up to cover her mouth. She took one step, then another, moving toward the door without looking away from Emma. Emma ran. She pushed through the diner door and her socked feet hit the wet pavement, and she crossed the parking lot in seconds and threw herself into Rachel's arms. Rachel caught her. Both arms wrapped all the way around her daughter, pulling her in close and holding on. She was saying something into Emma's hair, but Jack could not hear the words through the glass. Her shoulders shook. Emma had her face buried in her mother's neck. Jack stood in the doorway and watched. Mary came and stood beside him, drying her hands on her apron. Neither of them spoke. It was the kind of moment that did not need words. But then, after a long minute, something shifted. Emma pulled back, just slightly. Not all the way, just enough to look at her mother's face. And the expression that crossed Emma's face in that moment was not just happiness. It was something more complicated than that. Her chin trembled, her brow creased, and in a small, careful voice, she asked the question that had clearly been living inside her for a very long time. "Why didn't you come back for me?" Rachel closed her eyes. "I tried," she whispered. "I tried every single day." Emma stared at her, wanting so badly to believe it, and also, just as badly, afraid to. Mary quietly ushered them both inside. She pulled 2 stools close together at the counter and set down fresh orange juice and a small plate of buttered toast without being asked. Then she disappeared into the kitchen and gave them their space. Jack moved to the far end of the counter with his coffee. Close enough to be there if needed. Far enough to give them room. Rachel and Emma sat side by side on the stools. Their knees were almost touching. Rachel kept one hand resting near Emma's on the counter, not grabbing, not forcing. Just there. Available. Emma stared at her juice. "I thought you left because of Darren," Emma said. Her voice was small but steady. "He told me you were happier without us." Rachel pressed her lips together. She breathed slowly through her nose before she answered. "I want to tell you something true," Rachel said, "and I need you to really hear it." She waited until Emma looked up at her. "I was never happier. Not one single day, not even close." Emma held her gaze for a moment. Then she looked back down at the counter. Rachel did not push. She just stayed there. After a while, Emma asked quietly, "Do you remember the purple umbrella?" Rachel blinked, then something soft moved across her face. "The one with the duck handle." Emma's chin lifted just slightly. "You let me pick it out." "You spent 20 minutes in that store deciding," Rachel said. "You kept going back and forth between the duck and the frog." "The frog had a crack in it?" "I remember." Rachel smiled gently. "You checked every single frog umbrella in the bin looking for a better one." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I still thought about the duck sometimes. When it rained—" Rachel's smile stayed, but her eyes filled. She did not wipe them. She just let the tears sit there. They talked like that for a long time. Small things, mostly. The kind of memories that do not seem important until they are all you have left of someone. The song Rachel used to hum while she made dinner. The way Emma used to arrange her stuffed animals in a very specific order every night before bed. The tree in their old backyard that had a branch shaped like an elbow. Emma remembered all of it. Jack noticed the way she offered each memory carefully. Like she was testing the water before stepping in. Like she needed to know that Rachel remembered too. That the life they had shared was real, and not something Emma had invented to make herself feel better during the years she spent alone. Every time Rachel answered, Emma's posture shifted just a little. Her shoulders came down, her hands stopped fidgeting. At one point, Rachel reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her phone. She turned the screen toward Emma. It was a photo. Emma, at maybe 5 years old, missing one front tooth, sitting on a porch step with a popsicle that had melted halfway down her arm. Emma stared at it. "You kept that?" "I kept all of them," Rachel said. "Every single one." Emma reached out and touched the screen with one finger, very gently, like the photo might disappear if she pressed too hard. "He told me you didn't want pictures of me anymore," she whispered. "He lied," Rachel said simply. Firmly. No anger in it. Just truth. "You were never unwanted, Emma. You were the most wanted person in my whole world." Emma did not answer right away. She kept looking at the photo. At the little girl on the porch step with the melting popsicle and the missing tooth, and the giant, happy smile. Then, very slowly, she leaned sideways and rested her head against Rachel's arm. Rachel went still, like she was afraid to move and break the spell. But Emma stayed. She just rested there, quiet and warm, her eyes finally closing. From the far end of the counter, Jack watched. He watched Rachel carefully bring her arm around Emma's small shoulders. He watched Emma let her. And he saw, in the soft morning light of that little roadside diner, the very first crack in a wall that had been built by years of lies. It was small, but it was real. Jack finished his coffee and set the cup down on the counter. Emma had fallen asleep against Rachel's arm. Rachel sat perfectly still, barely breathing, her cheek resting softly on top of Emma's head. She looked like she was afraid the whole moment might shatter if she moved even an inch. Jack caught Mary's eye across the counter. Mary tilted her head toward the back room. He nodded and followed her quietly. The kitchen smelled like bacon grease and dish soap. A ceiling fan turned slowly overhead. Mary pulled out a stool from beside the prep table and sat down. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at Jack with the kind of calm that only comes from a woman who has seen a lot of hard days and outlasted every single one of them. "We need to figure out what we actually have," Jack said. He kept his voice low. "Before Darren comes back with someone official." "I know," Mary said. "I've been thinking the same thing." She reached under the prep table and pulled out a cardboard box. Inside were papers and folders, the kind of records a small diner owner keeps when they have been running a place in the same community for 30 years. "I wasn't just a diner owner when that family lived here," Mary said. "I was on the school supply committee, the community board, the summer fair committee." She set the box on the table between them. "I knew Rachel Carter. I knew her well, and I knew she did not walk away from her little girl." Jack leaned forward and looked into the box. "What have you got?" "Old sign-in sheets from community events. Rachel's name is on half of them, right up until she disappeared. Then nothing." Mary tapped the edge of the box. "People don't just vanish from their whole life overnight. Not unless something or someone pushes them out." Jack started going through the papers carefully. Names, dates, small details, the kind of ordinary things that never seem important until they become the thread that unravels a lie. A few of the diner's regulars drifted into the kitchen throughout the morning, not because anyone called them, just because word travels fast in a small place, and good people tend to show up when something matters. A man named Gerald, who had lived 2 streets over from Rachel's old house, remembered the day a social worker came by asking questions. He remembered because it seemed strange. Rachel had always seemed like a good mother. He had assumed everything was fine afterward. Nobody told him it wasn't. A woman named Patrice had worked at Emma's school for a short time, years ago. She remembered Linda Parker. She remembered thinking Linda was always very careful about which records stayed on file and which ones didn't. At the time, it hadn't seemed like anything. Now she was not so sure. Jack wrote everything down in a small notebook he borrowed from Mary. By mid-morning, the picture was becoming clearer. Darren had not acted alone, and he had not acted quickly. This was years of careful, patient dishonesty. The kind that only works when someone helps you, and when everyone else is too busy to look twice. Tom Reynolds arrived just before 11. He was a solid man in his late 60s with white hair cut short and steady hands that had spent decades doing careful, important work. He had heard about Emma from a friend who had been at the diner the night before. He came without being asked. He sat across from Jack at the prep table and listened without interrupting. When Jack finished explaining, Tom opened his own folder. He had already been making calls that morning. "I pulled what I could from the county record system," Tom said. He spread 3 printed pages on the table. Emma's custody file was amended twice, both times under Linda Parker's authorization. He tapped one line near the bottom of the 2nd page. "This signature here doesn't match Linda's official signature from the school district's public records. Someone changed this document, and they weren't careful enough." He looked up at Jack. "This isn't just a family dispute anymore," Tom said quietly. "This is fraud." Jack stepped outside through the diner's side door. The morning air was cool and sharp, The parking lot was mostly empty. A few trucks sat along the far edge. His motorcycle stood where he had left it, patient and still, like it was waiting for him. Darren was leaning against his own truck near the road. He had a cigarette between his fingers, and his eyes were moving slowly across the lot, watching everything the way a man does when he is used to being in control of a situation. He saw Jack coming, and he did not flinch. That told Jack everything he needed to know about the kind of man Darren was. Jack walked up slowly. He stopped about 3 feet away. He did not cross his arms. He did not raise his voice. He just stood there, steady and calm, the way he had learned to stand when the situation required someone to be the solid thing in the room. "We should talk," Jack said. Darren took a slow drag from his cigarette. "You think I'm scared of you?" "I'm not trying to scare you," Jack said. "I'm giving you a chance to hear something before it gets worse." Darren let the smoke out through his nose. "Go ahead then." "Tom Reynolds pulled your custody records this morning," Jack said. He kept his voice even. "The signatures on Emma's amended file don't match Linda Parker's official records from the school district. Someone changed those documents, and the people sitting inside that diner right now are putting together a very clear picture of how it happened, and when." Something moved across Darren's face. It was quick, barely there, but Jack caught it. A small tightening around the eyes, the look of a man who had just felt the ground shift under his feet. But Darren recovered fast. He dropped the cigarette and pressed it out with his boot. "You're a hell's angel," Darren said. He said it slowly, like he was laying down a card he had been holding all morning. "You think anybody in that county records office is going to take your word over mine? You think a judge is going to look at a man with your patch on his back and decide you're the trustworthy one in the room?" Jack did not move. "They're going to see a biker who rode into town and stuck his nose in a family matter," Darren continued. His voice was getting steadier now, like he was finding his footing again. "They're going to wonder what your angle is, what you're getting out of this." He tilted his head slightly. "Your reputation is going to work against you. You know that." "My reputation isn't what's on those documents," Jack said. "The documents are what's on those documents." Darren shook his head slowly. He almost smiled. "You really think you can walk into this situation and fix it? A man like you?" "A man like me," Jack repeated. He said it quietly, without anger. Darren looked at him for a long moment, and then something shifted. The almost smile faded. The careful, controlled look that Darren had been wearing started to crack just slightly around the edges. He looked at Jack the way a person looks at someone they recognize from a long time ago, from a place they would rather not think about. "I knew you weren't what people say you are," Darren said. The words came out quieter than he probably intended, almost like he was thinking out loud before he could stop himself. "I saw what you did for that family over in Clement County, years back. That thing with the Hargrove kids." He paused, his jaw tightened. "I knew you were the kind of man who actually showed up." Jack went still. Darren seemed to realize what he had just said. His eyes sharpened, and he looked away quickly. But it was already out there. He had known. He had known who Jack was before Emma ever crawled under that table. He had counted on the leather vest and the patch and the reputation to make sure nobody listened to him. He had just never counted on the truth being loud enough to matter anyway. Jack stood in the parking lot long after Darren walked away. The morning air moved around him, cool and quiet. He could hear the faint sound of voices from inside the diner, the clinking of coffee cups, the soft scrape of chairs, normal sounds, warm sounds. Out here it felt different. He looked down at his hands. The knuckles were rough. The tattoos wound up his forearms, dark and faded in places from years of sun and road. He had stopped noticing them a long time ago. They were just part of him, but he knew what other people saw when they looked. Darren's words were still sitting in his chest like a stone. He had counted on the leather vest and the patch and the reputation. Jack had heard some version of that his whole life, the looks people gave him when he walked into a gas station, the way mothers pulled their children a little closer when he passed on the sidewalk, the way waitresses took a breath before walking over to his table. He understood it. He did not blame them for it. People saw what they saw, and they made the only judgment they knew how to make with the information they had. But understanding it did not mean it stopped hurting. There had been moments over the years, small ones. A woman he helped change a tire on the side of Route 40, who never even looked him in the eye when she thanked him. A family whose dog he carried to a vet after they hit it on the highway, and the father who gripped his kids tight the whole time, like he was not sure if Jack was more dangerous than the situation. A kid in a grocery store parking lot who had whispered to his mom, "Why does that man look so scary?" And the mom had not said anything. She had just steered the cart away. Jack had never told anyone those stories. There was no point. The road was easier than explaining yourself to people who had already made up their minds. He was still standing there, arms loose at his sides, eyes somewhere far off, when he heard the side door open behind him. Small footsteps. He turned around. Emma stood at the edge of the lot in a borrowed sweater that was 3 sizes too big for her. Her hair was still messy from the morning. She had a piece of toast in one hand, and she was looking at him the way only a child looks at someone. Straight on. No filter, no pretending. "Mary said you were out here," Emma said. "Just getting some air," Jack said. She walked over and stood beside him. Not too close, but close enough. She looked out at the lot the same way he had been looking at it, like she was trying to see what he saw. They stood like that for a moment. Then Emma said, "How come strangers are afraid of you?" Jack looked down at her. She was not asking to be mean. There was no cruelty in it. She just wanted to know. The way kids ask about things that adults spend years pretending are not there. He thought about giving her the easy answer. Something short. Something that would let him change the subject. But Emma had been lied to enough. "Because of how I look," he said. "The vest, the tattoos, the bike. People see all that and they decide who I am before I ever say a word." Emma thought about that. She took a small bite of her toast and chewed it slowly. "That doesn't seem fair," she said. "It isn't always," Jack said. "But I get it. People go by what they can see. It's just how it works." Emma looked up at him. Her eyes were serious and steady, the way they got when she was really thinking something through. "But you came and sat with me," she said. "When I was scared. You didn't have to do that." "No," Jack said. "I didn't." "That's what you actually did, though," Emma said simply. "That's the real part." Jack felt something loosen in his chest. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I guess it is." Emma looked back out at the parking lot. "I think people should look at what somebody does, not just what they're wearing." Jack nodded slowly. "That's exactly right." She glanced up at him again. Her voice was matter-of-fact, the way children say the truest things like they are the most obvious things in the world. "I think you're a good man, Jack." He did not say anything for a moment. He just stood there in the cool morning air with a little girl in an oversized sweater standing beside him, and he let the words land somewhere they had not been in a very long time. "Thank you, Emma," he finally said. She gave a small nod, satisfied, like the matter was settled. And in her mind, it probably was. The lawyer's name was Grace Holloway. She drove 2 hours from the city after Rachel called her. She had a worn leather briefcase, sharp eyes behind simple wire glasses, and the kind of calm that made you feel like things might actually be okay. Mary had closed the diner early. The booths were empty now except for their group. Rachel sat at the center table with Emma beside her, close enough that their arms touched. Tom Reynolds had his notepad out. Jack leaned against the counter near the window, arms folded, watching and listening. Grace set her briefcase on the table, clicked it open, and spread out the documents Emma had carried in that small envelope. She handled each paper carefully, like she understood exactly how much they meant. Nobody spoke while she read. The only sounds were the quiet hum of the refrigerator behind the counter and the occasional shift of a chair. Mary had brought coffee for everyone. Hers sat untouched. Finally, Grace looked up. "Okay," she said. "Let me walk you through what we have." She laid 3 documents flat on the table and turned them so the group could see. "These letters are dated," she said. "Rachel, this one here is yours. You wrote it to Emma 3 years ago. It was never delivered." She paused. "That matters. It establishes a timeline that contradicts Darren's version of events." Rachel looked at the letter. Her jaw tightened, but she held herself steady. "This second document," Grace continued, tapping a worn piece of paper with a county seal on it, "is a residency record. It places Emma at Darren's address during a period when he claimed to authorities that her living situation was unstable due to Rachel's absence." She looked over at Tom. "You spotted this one?" Tom nodded. "The dates don't line up. He told 2 different stories to 2 different offices, and nobody cross-checked them." "They rarely do," Grace said. "That's how these things survive, as long as they do." She picked up the photograph from the envelope. "And this. A photograph dated on the back. Emma, do you know where you were when this was taken?" Emma studied it carefully. "My grandma's house," she said quietly. "Before Darren said we couldn't go anymore." Grace nodded and made a note. "That helps us establish the relationship between Rachel and Emma prior to Darren's interference." She set her pen down. "Here's what this tells me. Darren built his story in layers. He told the school one thing. He told social services another. He kept the circles small and separate so nobody could compare notes." "Linda made sure of that," Jack said from the counter. Grace glanced at him. "The school counselor." "She signed off on at least one of those reports," Tom said. "I recognized the name on the second page. She was listed as a confirming source." "Which means she didn't just stay quiet," Grace said. "She actively supported the false record." She took her glasses off and set them on the table. "That changes things significantly. It means this wasn't just one man keeping a secret. It was a coordinated effort." Emma was very still beside Rachel. Rachel reached over and put her hand gently over Emma's. "Can we fix it?" Rachel asked. Her voice was steady, but just barely. Grace looked at her directly. "Yes," she said. "We can fix it." The word yes landed in the room like sunlight coming through a cracked window. Mary let out a slow breath. Tom sat back in his chair. "We have enough to file a formal challenge to the existing custody record and to request an emergency review," Grace said. "The documentation Emma found, combined with Tom's timeline work, gives us a strong foundation. Courts respond to inconsistencies in official records, and we have several." She began gathering the papers back into order. "I want to be honest with all of you," she said. Her voice stayed calm, but something in it sharpened. "What we have is real, and it is enough, but Darren has had years to protect this story." She looked around the table at each of them. "When he realizes this is moving forward, he will try one more time to hold it together." Grace had just finished stacking the papers when the bell above the diner door rang. Everyone looked up. Linda Parker stepped inside. She was dressed neatly, like always. Dark slacks, a soft blue cardigan. Her hair was pulled back the same way Emma had seen it 1,000 times outside the school counselor's office. She looked calm, professional. She even smiled a little when she saw Emma. Emma went very still. "I heard what was happening," Linda said. Her voice was warm. She used the same tone she always used when she sat across from Emma in that small office with the motivational posters on the walls. "I wanted to come and help." Nobody spoke right away. Mary stood near the counter with her arms crossed. Tom's eyes moved to Grace. Jack pushed himself off the counter and stood up straighter without saying a word. Linda walked toward the table slowly. Her eyes stayed on Emma. "Emma, sweetheart," she said softly. "I know this is scary. I know everything feels like a lot right now." She pulled out a chair and sat down like she belonged there. "I've always been on your side. You know that." Emma stared at her. She did know that. Or she thought she did. Linda had been the one person at school Emma felt safe talking to. When kids were mean, Linda listened. When Emma cried about missing her mom, Linda handed her tissues and said things like, "Sometimes parents make hard choices," in that gentle, careful voice. Emma had believed her. Every single time. Rachel felt Emma's hand tighten under hers. "I only ever wanted to protect you," Linda continued. She leaned forward a little. "Whatever you found, whatever people are telling you now, I need you to understand that everything I did came from caring about you." Emma's throat felt tight. Part of her wanted to believe it. That part was 8 years old and still remembered sitting in Linda's office eating the little wrapped candies Linda kept in a jar on her desk. That part of her remembered feeling safe there. But another part of her was remembering something else now. She was remembering all the times she told Linda she missed her mom. All the times she said something felt wrong at home. And Linda always had a reason. Always had a soft explanation that made Emma feel like she was the one misunderstanding things. "You told me my mom moved on," Emma said. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to. Linda's expression shifted slightly. Just for a second. Then the warmth came back. "I told you what I believed was true at the time." "Was it true?" Emma asked. Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. Grace spoke from across the table. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Ms. Parker, I'm Emma's legal representative. I'd like to ask you a few questions." She slid one of the papers across the table and turned it to face Linda. "Can you explain why your name appears as a confirming source on this residency report?" Linda looked at the paper. Her shoulders straightened slightly. "I was asked to confirm Emma's situation at school. I gave an accurate account of what I observed." "This report states that Rachel Carter had shown no contact or interest in Emma's welfare for over 14 months, Grace said. During that same period, Rachel made 3 separate attempts to contact Emma through the school directly. She tapped the page. "Those contact requests came through your office." The room was completely silent. Linda's hands folded together on the table. "I don't recall those specifically." "They were logged," Tom said. He turned his notepad around. "I found the intake records this afternoon. Your office received them. There is a signature on each one." Emma looked at Linda. Something in Linda's careful, practiced expression began to crack. Just slightly. Just enough for Emma to see what had always been underneath it. Linda had known. She had known Rachel was looking. She had known, and she had let Emma sit in that small office with the candy jar and the motivational posters and cry about a mother she thought didn't want her. Emma felt something break open quietly inside her chest. Emma pushed back from the table. She didn't say anything. She just stood up fast, like the chair was burning her, and walked toward the far side of the diner near the window. She pressed her back against the wall and stared at the floor. Her hands were shaking. Rachel started to rise, but Jack was already moving. He crossed the diner slowly, not rushing, the way he moved when he didn't want to startle anyone. He stopped a few feet away from Emma and leaned his shoulder against the wall beside her. He didn't say anything right away. Outside, the rain had softened to a quiet drizzle. The streetlight near the parking lot made the wet pavement glow orange. A car passed on the highway, and its headlights swept across the ceiling for just a second before disappearing. Emma kept her eyes down. "You don't have to go back over there yet," Jack said. His voice was low and easy, not the kind of voice that expected anything. Emma shook her head a little. Her jaw was tight. Her chest hurt in a way she didn't have words for. "I told her everything," Emma said. The words came out rough. "I told her I missed my mom. I told her stuff hurt. I told her so many things." She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a second. And she already knew. She already knew the whole time. Jack nodded slowly. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't say something about how everything was going to be okay now. He just nodded like he understood that what she was feeling was real and heavy and worth taking seriously. "That's a hard thing to find out," he said. "I feel stupid," Emma said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "You're not stupid," Jack said. Firm. Simple. No extra words attached. "I believed her." "Because she was supposed to be safe," Jack said. "That's not stupid. That's what kids do when adults are supposed to be looking out for them. You trusted the right way. She used it the wrong way. That's on her, not on you." Emma looked up at him for the first time. Her eyes were red and wet at the corners. "It makes me so mad," she whispered. "I'm really, really mad." "Good," Jack said quietly. Emma blinked. "Good?" "Means you know something was wrong." He shifted his weight against the wall and looked down at her with that calm, steady expression that had made her feel safe since the very first moment she crawled under his table. "Anger like that isn't bad. It just needs somewhere to go. If you keep it locked up inside, it sits in your chest and gets heavier. But if you say it out loud, it can't crush you the same way." Emma looked back at the floor. Her hands had stopped shaking quite as much. "I don't know how to say it," she said. "You just did," Jack told her. "You said you're mad. You said it hurt. That's the start." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sad too. Both at the same time." "Yeah," Jack said. "Sometimes things earn both." Emma wiped her eyes quickly with the sleeve of her sweater. She glanced across the diner at her mom. Rachel was sitting at the table with her hands folded, watching her daughter with an expression that was full of patience and pain and love, all mixed together. Emma looked back at Jack. Then she stood up a little straighter. Not all the way. Not like it didn't hurt anymore, but enough. Enough to take a breath that went all the way down. She walked back to the table. She sat down across from Rachel, and she looked at her mom, and then she looked at Jack as he settled into the seat beside her. "It hurt," Emma said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. "It hurt for a really long time, and I didn't know why, but I'm not going to let it keep hurting me the same way." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Emma reached across and took her mother's hand. The next few days moved fast. Mary kept the diner open late every night. The back corner booth became something like a war room. Tom spread papers across the table. Rachel organized documents into neat stacks. Jack sat at the edge of it all, quiet and steady, making sure nothing got missed. Emma stayed close. She colored at a small table nearby while the adults worked, but her ears were always tuned in. She was sharper than people gave her credit for. She noticed things, remembered things. More than once she looked up from her drawing and said, "That's not right," and pointed to something in a document, and she was correct every single time. Tom shook his head the first time it happened. "Kid's got a memory like a steel trap," he said. Mary smiled from behind the counter. "She gets it from her mama." Rachel looked over at Emma, and her expression was soft and full. The kind of look that had years of missing packed into it. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. The lawyer, a steady woman named Carol Birch, who wore sensible shoes and spoke like she had all the time in the world, told them the evidence was strong. The fake records Linda helped create had started to unravel the moment Tom knew where to look. There were dates that didn't line up, signatures that didn't match, a paper trail that told the truth even when the people involved refused to. "Darren's been controlling the story for a long time," Carol said Tuesday evening, tapping the stack of papers in front of her. "But a story only holds up when no one looks too close. People are looking now." Jack leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. He thought about Darren standing in this very diner just days ago, so sure of himself. That wide, empty smile. The way he looked around the room like he owned it. He wasn't smiling now. Word had gotten back through the community that Darren had been making phone calls, trying to get people to back his version of things. But one by one, people were stepping back from him. The wall he'd built around his lies was cracking. Linda had stopped responding to messages from the school board. Jack didn't feel satisfaction exactly. It was more like relief, like watching a door finally open after someone had been trapped behind it for too long. He looked over at Emma. She had stopped coloring. She was sitting with her chin resting in her hand, staring at nothing in particular, thinking the way she did sometimes when the weight of everything caught up with her. But then she blinked and looked at her drawing and picked up a red crayon and kept going. She was going to be okay. He believed that all the way down. After Carol left and Emma had fallen asleep on the small cot Mary had set up in the back room, Rachel came and sat beside Jack at the counter. Mary set 2 cups of coffee down and quietly disappeared into the kitchen to give them space. Rachel wrapped both hands around her mug. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "I keep trying to find the words and they don't feel like enough." "They're enough," Jack said. Rachel was quiet for a moment. She looked down at her coffee. "She talks about you constantly," she said. Her voice was gentle but careful. "Jack said this. Jack did that. Jack thinks." She paused. "I'm grateful. I really am. I just—" She stopped again. Jack waited. "She's been through so much," Rachel said. "I don't want her to build her whole world around one person and then have that person." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Jack nodded slowly. He understood what Rachel was saying. She wasn't being unkind. She was being a mother. She was protecting Emma the only way she knew how right now, which was looking ahead at the things that could hurt her. He stared at his coffee for a long moment. "She's lucky to have you looking out for her," he said quietly. But even as he said it, something settled in his chest. Heavy and familiar. He had always known his role here had a finish line. He just hadn't let himself think about crossing it until now. Jack stepped outside the diner just after midnight. The air was cool and clean, the kind of night where everything felt still and honest. His motorcycle sat in the same spot he'd parked it days ago, dust settling on the chrome, the leather seat worn smooth from years of riding. He ran his hand along the handlebars. It felt like greeting an old friend. For the first time since Emma had crawled beneath his table, Jack let himself think about the road. Not just the stretch of highway that had brought him here, but all the miles waiting beyond this small town. The open country, the quiet, the places where nobody knew his name and nobody expected anything from him. He had always felt at home out there, alone, but at home. Now it felt different. He looked back toward the diner. The lights were still on inside. Mary was wiping down tables. Tom was packing up the last of his files. Rachel was probably sitting with Emma, watching her sleep the way mothers do when they've been separated too long. Jack felt proud. He had done something that mattered. He had stepped in when a frightened little girl needed someone, and he hadn't walked away. He had protected her. He had helped bring her mother back. He had made sure the people who lied about her couldn't keep lying. That was enough. It had to be enough. But standing there in the dark, feeling the weight of his leather vest against his shoulders and the cold metal of his bike beneath his palm, Jack knew what came next. He had always known. Rachel's words were still sitting in his chest like stones. She hadn't said anything cruel. She had just told him the truth. Emma had already lost too much. She couldn't afford to lose someone else. And Jack understood. He wasn't Emma's father. He wasn't family. He was just the man who happened to be sitting at the right table at the right time. That's what heroes did. They showed up when they were needed. And then they left when the crisis was over. People didn't build their lives around heroes. They built their lives around the people who stayed. Jack wasn't a staying kind of person. He climbed onto his bike and sat there for a while, hands resting on his thighs, staring at the empty road ahead. The hearing was Thursday morning. 2 more days. He would be there. He would make sure Emma and Rachel had everything they needed. He would watch Darren's lies fall apart in front of everyone who had believed them. He would see Emma safe. And then he would go. It was the right thing to do. The clean thing. Rachel would have space to rebuild her relationship with her daughter without a rough-edged biker complicating things. Emma would settle into a normal life with her mother. The town would move on. Jack would ride away before anyone had to worry about goodbyes. That night, back in the small motel room he'd been renting just outside town, Jack began packing his things. There wasn't much. A duffel bag, some clothes, a few tools, a photograph he kept folded in his wallet of his late wife, her smile caught in a moment he could barely remember now, but still carried everywhere. He set everything on the bed and organized it the way he always did before a long ride. Practical, efficient, no extra weight. He told himself it made sense. He told himself Rachel was right to protect Emma from getting too attached. He told himself he had done his part, and now it was time to let them have their life back. But when he zipped the duffel closed, the sound felt too final. Jack sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the bag. He thought about Emma's drawings. The way she said his name like it meant something solid. The way she had looked at him when she'd handed him that card with the careful crayon letters. Thank you for seeing me when nobody else did. He rubbed his face with both hands. Thursday. He would stay through Thursday. And then he would leave. The courthouse lobby smelled like old wood and floor polish. Jack stood near the windows, hands in his pockets, watching people file in. Rachel sat on one of the long wooden benches with Emma tucked close against her side. The little girl's legs swung nervously, too short to reach the floor. She wore a blue dress Rachel had bought her 2 days earlier, and her hair was pulled back into 2 neat braids. She looked small. Too small to be sitting in a room where adults would decide whether she deserved to be believed. Their lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Brennan, stood nearby reviewing her notes. She was calm and focused. She had told them yesterday that the evidence was strong. The documents proved Rachel had been searching for Emma. The false records Linda had created were sloppy once someone knew what to look for. Darren's story had too many holes. But she had also warned them that courtrooms were unpredictable. People believed what they wanted to believe. Jack glanced at Emma. She was gripping her mother's hand so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Rachel leaned down and whispered something Jack couldn't hear. Emma nodded, but didn't let go. Tom Reynolds appeared from down the hallway, his expression serious but steady. He nodded at Jack. "They're ready," Tom said quietly. Ms. Brennan looked up from her notes. "Let's go." They walked into the courtroom together. The room was smaller than Jack expected. Rows of wooden benches faced the judge's platform at the front. Darren was already seated at the opposite table with his own lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who looked like he smiled for a living. Linda sat behind them, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her face carefully blank. Jack took a seat in the first row behind Rachel and Emma. Tom sat beside him. Mary had stayed back at the diner, but she had promised to light a candle and say a prayer. The judge entered, and everyone stood. When they sat back down, Jack felt Emma turn around in her seat. She looked at him, her eyes wide and scared. He gave her a small nod, the kind that said, "You're okay. I'm right here." She turned back around. The hearing began. Ms. Brennan stood and presented the case clearly and calmly. She explained that Emma had been wrongfully separated from her mother through a series of lies orchestrated by Darren Whitmore and enabled by Linda Parker. She laid out the timeline. She showed the court documents proving Rachel had filed missing person reports and contacted authorities repeatedly over the years. She presented the envelope Emma had found in Darren's truck, the photographs, the letters, the records that proved Rachel had never stopped searching. Darren's lawyer objected twice, but the judge allowed the evidence. Then it was Darren's turn. He stood slowly, his expression sorrowful and calm. He looked like a man who had been misunderstood, a man who only wanted what was best for a child. He spoke directly to the judge. "Your Honor, I loved Emma like she was my own daughter. When Rachel left, I didn't know what to do. I was heartbroken. But I stayed because Emma needed someone. I gave her a home. I made sure she had food, clothes, a school. I did everything a parent is supposed to do." Jack's jaw tightened. Darren continued. "Rachel disappeared. She didn't call. She didn't write. Emma asked about her every day, and I had to tell that little girl her mother chose to leave. It broke my heart. But I couldn't lie to her. I couldn't let her keep hoping for someone who wasn't coming back." He paused, letting the words settle. "Everything I did was to protect her from more pain." The courtroom was silent. Jack saw a few people in the back rows nodding slightly. Darren's performance was convincing. He sounded like a man who had made hard choices for the right reasons. Ms. Brennan stood. "Mr. Whitmore, you said Rachel disappeared." "Yes." "And you claim you didn't know where she was." "That's correct." Ms. Brennan walked to her table and picked up a folder. She opened it and pulled out several documents. "Then why did you receive 12 letters from Rachel Carter over a 3-year period, all sent to your home address, all requesting information about Emma's whereabouts?" The room shifted. Darren's expression faltered for just a second before smoothing back into calm concern. "I never received any letters." "The Postal Service has records proving delivery," Ms. Brennan said. "Signed for. By you." She handed the documents to the judge. Darren's lawyer leaned over and whispered something urgent. Darren didn't respond. Ms. Brennan continued. "You also told the court that Rachel never contacted authorities. but we have records showing she filed 3 separate missing person reports in 2 different counties, reports that were closed without investigation. She looked directly at Linda. Reports closed by school officials who claimed Emma was safe and accounted for under your care. Linda's face remained blank, but her hands tightened in her lap. The judge reviewed the documents carefully, then looked up. Ms. Parker, did you assist Mr. Whitmore in closing these reports? Linda hesitated. Then she spoke, her voice measured. I believed I was acting in Emma's best interest. The child was stable. She had a home. Reopening old wounds seemed cruel. Reopening old wounds, Ms. Brennan repeated. Or preventing a mother from finding her daughter? Linda didn't answer. The judge turned his attention back to Darren. Mr. Whitmore, why did you tell Emma her mother had abandoned her when you had evidence she was actively searching? Darren opened his mouth, then closed it. Ms. Brennan didn't wait. Because the truth would have destroyed the life you built. Emma wasn't your daughter. You had no legal custody. If Rachel found her, you would lose control. That's not true, Darren said, but his voice had lost its steady tone. Ms. Brennan gestured toward Emma. Your Honor, I'd like Emma Carter to tell the court what she remembers. The judge nodded. Rachel squeezed Emma's hand one more time, then let go. Emma stood. She walked slowly to the front of the room, her small shoes barely making a sound on the floor. A court assistant helped her into the witness chair. She looked impossibly tiny sitting there. The judge spoke gently. Emma, you don't have to be scared. Just tell us what you remember. Emma's voice was quiet but clear. Darren told me my mom didn't want me anymore. He said she left because I wasn't good enough. He said if I told anyone I missed her, it would make things worse. So I stopped asking. She looked at Darren. But I found the letters, in his truck. My mom wrote my name on them. She said she loved me. She said she was looking for me. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. He lied. The courtroom was silent. Emma looked at the judge. My mom never left me. He took her away. The judge leaned back in his chair, studying the documents in front of him. The courtroom remained still. Emma climbed down from the witness chair with help from the court assistant and walked back to her mother. Rachel wrapped her arms around her daughter and held her close. Ms. Brennan returned to her seat. Darren's lawyer whispered something urgent, but Darren wasn't listening. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Your Honor, if I may speak. The judge looked up. Mr. Whitmore, your attorney should... Please, Darren interrupted. His voice was different now, softer, almost pleading. I just need 1 minute. I need Emma to understand. The judge hesitated, then nodded. 1 minute. Darren turned toward Emma. He didn't move closer, but his expression shifted into something that looked like regret, like a man who had made terrible mistakes and finally realized the weight of them. Jack's entire body tensed. He knew what was coming. One last manipulation. Darren's voice broke slightly as he spoke. Emma, I know you're angry with me. I know you think I'm a bad person. But everything I did because I was trying to protect you. Emma stiffened in her mother's arms but didn't look away. Darren continued. Your mother and I had problems. Adult problems you were too young to understand. When she left, I didn't know if she was coming back. I didn't know if she was safe. And I couldn't let you grow up waiting for someone who might never return. I couldn't let you spend your childhood hoping and hurting every single day. His voice grew quieter, more intimate, as if he were speaking only to her. So I told you she wasn't coming back. I told you she chose a different life, And yes, I kept the letters from you. But I did it because I didn't want you to be confused. I didn't want you to feel torn between two people. I wanted you to feel safe and loved in the home we built together." He paused, his eyes glistening. "I made mistakes. I see that now. But I never wanted to hurt you, Emma. I only wanted you to have a stable life. A life where you didn't have to worry. Where you didn't have to wonder if the people around you would leave." Some of the people in the courtroom shifted in their seats. Darren's words sounded reasonable. Compassionate, even. He was painting himself as a flawed man who had made difficult choices out of love. Jack saw Rachel's hand tighten protectively around Emma's shoulder. Darren took a small step forward. "I know I can't change the past, but I hope someday you'll understand that I was trying to be the father you needed. That's all I ever wanted. To protect you." The courtroom waited. The judge looked at Emma. "Do you have anything you'd like to say in response?" Emma didn't answer right away. She sat very still in her mother's arms, staring at Darren. Her face was calm, but Jack could see the emotions moving behind her eyes. Fear, anger, confusion, and then something else. Clarity. Emma stood slowly. Rachel reached for her hand, but Emma gently pulled away. She walked forward a few steps, close enough that Darren could see her clearly, but not close enough for him to reach her. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "You didn't protect me." Darren opened his mouth, but Emma kept talking. "You told me my mom didn't want me. You told me I wasn't good enough. You made me think I was alone. Every day I thought nobody loved me. Every day I thought I did something wrong, and that's why she left." Her voice grew stronger. "But she didn't leave. You took her away. You hid her letters. You lied to everyone so I couldn't find her. You didn't protect me. You stole the people who loved me." Darren's expression cracked. "Emma, You made me scared," Emma said. "You made me think I had to be quiet, that I couldn't tell anyone the truth, that nobody would believe me." She took a breath. "But Jack believed me. Mary believed me. Tom believed me. My mom never stopped looking for me. You didn't protect me from anything. You just made sure I couldn't be happy." The courtroom was completely silent. Emma looked directly at Darren, and for the first time, there was no fear in her eyes. "I'm not scared of you anymore." The judge's gavel came down an hour later with a decision that changed everything. Emma would return to her mother's custody immediately. Darren would face charges for falsifying documents and parental interference. Linda would be investigated for her role in the deception. The truth that had been buried for years was finally recognized by the court. Rachel held Emma close as they walked out of the courthouse together. The afternoon sun felt warmer than it had in a long time. Emma squeezed her mother's hand, and Rachel squeezed back. They sat on the courthouse steps for a moment, just the two of them, letting the reality settle in. "We can go anywhere you want," Rachel said softly. "We can stay here, or we can move somewhere new, somewhere fresh. Whatever makes you feel safe." Emma thought about it. "Can we get a house with a porch?" Rachel smiled. "A house with a porch. I think we can do that. And a garden?" "A garden, too." Emma leaned against her mother's shoulder. "Will Jack come visit us?" Rachel hesitated. She looked across the parking lot where Jack stood beside his motorcycle, talking quietly with Tom. His leather vest was dusty from the road. His expression was calm, but Rachel recognized the look of someone preparing to leave. "I think Jack has his own life to get back to," Rachel said gently. "But we'll always be grateful for what he did." Emma didn't say anything, but Rachel felt her daughter's hand tighten slightly. Across the parking lot, Jack finished shaking Tom's hand. "You did a hell of a thing," Tom said. Not many people would have stood up the way you did. Jack shrugged. Just did what needed doing. Tom studied him. You heading out? Yeah, figure it's time. Emma's gonna miss you. Jack looked toward the courthouse steps where Emma and Rachel sat together. His chest tightened. She's got her mom now. That's what matters. Tom nodded slowly. You ever think maybe she's got room for more than one person in her life? Jack didn't answer. He climbed onto his motorcycle and checked the straps on his gear. Everything was in place. Everything was ready. Mary came out of the courthouse carrying a small paper bag. She walked straight over to Jack and held it out. Sandwiches for the road, she said. You're not leaving without eating something. Jack took the bag. Appreciate it, Mary. Mary crossed her arms. You're really just going to ride off without saying goodbye to that little girl? She needs time with her mom. They've got a lot to rebuild. They do, Mary agreed. But that doesn't mean you have to disappear. Jack looked down at his hands. I'm not her family, Mary. I was just someone who was there when she needed help. Mary shook her head. You're more than that, and you know it. Jack started the engine. The rumble of the motorcycle filled the quiet parking lot. He gave Mary a small nod, then pulled out onto the road. Rachel watched him go. She felt Emma shift beside her. He's leaving, Emma said quietly. Rachel put her arm around her daughter. He probably thinks we need time together, just the two of us. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I have a mom now, but I can still have a Jack. Rachel looked down at her daughter's serious face. She saw the truth in Emma's eyes. Jack had been more than just someone who helped. He had been the person who believed her when nobody else would. He had been the one who made her feel safe. He had been the one who taught her she was worth protecting. You're right, Rachel said. She stood up and held out her hand. Come on. They went back inside the courthouse and borrowed Tom's phone. Rachel dialed the number Mary had written down for her. It rang 3 times before Jack answered. Yeah? Jack, it's Rachel. She paused. I was wondering if you'd like to come to dinner tonight. Emma and I are getting takeout, and we'd really like you to be there, just to say thank you properly. There was a long silence on the other end. You don't have to thank me, Jack said finally. I know, Rachel said, but we'd like you to come anyway. Another pause. Please, Emma said, leaning close to the phone. Jack's voice softened. All right, I'll be there. Jack showed up at the small apartment Rachel had rented with a bag of groceries in one hand and a toolbox in the other. Rachel opened the door, surprised. I said we were getting takeout. Figured I could cook instead, Jack said, if that's all right. Emma appeared behind her mother, eyes bright. What are you making? Spaghetti, nothing fancy. Emma grinned. I like spaghetti. Rachel stepped aside and let him in. The apartment was small but clean. Boxes were still stacked against the walls. A single couch sat in the living room, and the kitchen table had 2 chairs. Jack set the groceries on the counter and started unpacking. Rachel moved to help, but he waved her off. You've been dealing with lawyers all day. Sit. I've got this. She sat at the table with Emma, watching as Jack moved through the kitchen with surprising ease. He chopped onions and garlic, browned the meat, and stirred the sauce with practiced motions. You cook a lot? Rachel asked. Enough to get by, Jack said. Learned when I was younger. Mom worked nights, so I made dinner for my brothers. Emma rested her chin on her hands. Do you have brothers now? Jack shook his head. Lost touch years ago. They went their own way. Emma thought about that. Do you miss them? Jack paused. Sometimes. The sauce simmered on the stove, filling the small apartment with the smell of tomatoes and herbs. Jack found a pot for the pasta and set it to boil. Dinner was ready 20 minutes later. Jack served 3 plates and sat down at the table. Rachel brought over a third chair from the bedroom. They ate together in comfortable silence. Emma twirled spaghetti on her fork and watched Jack carefully. "You're good at cooking," she said. "Thanks. Can you teach me?" Jack looked at Rachel, who nodded. "Sure," he said. "Next time?" Emma smiled. After dinner, Jack helped clear the plates. Emma tugged on his sleeve. "Can you help me build something?" "Build what?" "A bookshelf. Mom said we could get one, but the store only had ones you put together yourself." Jack glanced at Rachel, who looked embarrassed. "I wasn't expecting you to do that tonight." "It's fine," Jack said. "Where's the box?" Emma led him to her small bedroom. The box was leaning against the wall. Jack opened it and spread the pieces across the floor. Emma sat beside him, holding the instructions. "This piece goes here," she said, pointing at the diagram. Jack nodded. "You're right. Hand me that one." They worked together, Emma reading the instructions and Jack assembling the frame. Rachel watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, a soft smile on her face. "You're good at this," Emma said. "Done it before." "Did you build stuff for your wife?" Jack's hands stilled for a moment. Then he nodded. "Yeah, she liked fixing up the house. I did most of the heavy work." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Do you still miss her?" Jack tightened a screw. "Every day." "I missed my mom every day too," Emma said. "But now she's here." Jack looked at her. Emma's face was serious, thoughtful. "I'm glad she is," Jack said. They finished the bookshelf an hour later. Jack carried it over to the wall and set it upright. Emma immediately started placing books on the shelves, arranging them carefully. "Perfect," she said. Jack stood and stretched. "Glad you like it." Rachel stepped into the room. "Thank you, Jack. For everything?" He nodded. "I should probably head out. It's getting late." Emma turned around. "Are you leaving again?" Jack hesitated. "Just going back to the motel." "But you'll come back tomorrow?" Jack looked at Rachel. She gave him a small, encouraging nod. "If that's all right," Jack said. "It's all right," Rachel said. Emma crossed the room and stood in front of Jack. She looked up at him with those same serious eyes. "Will you stay in my life?" she asked. Jack crouched down so they were eye level. "What do you mean? I mean, will you keep coming back? Will you be around? Like family?" Jack's chest tightened. He had spent years believing he was meant to be alone. That family was something other people had. That his role was to help and then leave. But Emma wasn't asking for a hero. She was asking for someone who stayed. Jack looked at Rachel. She was watching him carefully, her expression soft. He looked back at Emma. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'll stay." Emma wrapped her arms around his neck. Jack held her gently, his eyes burning. Rachel smiled. For the first time in years, Jack felt like he belonged somewhere. Weeks later, Jack pulled his motorcycle into the gravel parking lot of the roadside diner. The sun was setting behind the building, casting long shadows across the pavement. He cut the engine and sat for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the evening. It felt different coming back here now. The last time he had been at this diner, Emma had been hiding beneath his table. Darren had been standing in the doorway. The whole room had been filled with tension and fear. Now it was just a quiet Tuesday evening. Jack climbed off the bike and walked toward the front door. The bell chimed as he stepped inside. The diner looked the same. The same worn booths lined the walls. The same checkered floor stretched toward the counter. The same smell of coffee and frying bacon hung in the air. But the way people looked at him had changed. A man near the counter glanced up from his plate and nodded. "Evening?" Jack nodded back. A woman sitting in a booth with her daughter smiled at him. "Good to see you again?" Jack felt a flicker of surprise. He was used to people looking away when he walked into a room. He was used to conversations stopping. He was used to being the person others avoided. But tonight, people met his eyes. They smiled. They welcomed him. Mary appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face lit up when she saw him. "Jack Morgan," she said warmly. "I was wondering when you'd come back." Jack crossed the room and sat down at the counter. "Figured it was about time." Mary poured him a cup of coffee without asking. She set it in front of him and leaned against the counter. "How's Emma doing?" she asked. "Good," Jack said. "She's settling in with Rachel. They're doing all right." Mary smiled. "I'm glad to hear it. That little girl deserves all the peace in the world." Jack took a sip of coffee. "She does." Mary studied him for a moment. "And how are you doing?" Jack shrugged. "Fine." Mary gave him a knowing look. "You're not good at talking about yourself, are you?" Jack almost smiled. "Not really." Mary chuckled and shook her head. "Well, whether you want to hear it or not, I'm going to tell you something." Jack waited. "The whole town knows what you did for Emma," Mary said. "And I mean everyone. The grocery store clerk, the librarian, the woman who runs the flower shop. They all know you're the one who protected that little girl when nobody else would." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would have done." Mary shook her head firmly. "No, Jack. Most people would have looked the other way. Most people would have handed her over to Darren and gone back to their coffee. But you didn't." Jack stared down at his cup. He didn't know what to say. Mary leaned closer. "People around here used to look at you and see the leather vest, the tattoos, the bike. They saw what they expected to see." Jack's jaw tightened. He knew that feeling well. "But now," Mary continued, "now they see the man who saved a child. They see the man who stood up when it mattered. They see the man who proved that kindness doesn't have a dress code." Jack looked up at her. Mary's eyes were warm and sincere. "You changed how this town thinks, Jack," she said quietly. "You showed them that heroes don't always look like heroes." Jack felt something shift inside his chest. For years, he had believed people would only ever see the surface, that no matter what he did, he would always be the scary biker, the outsider, the man people crossed the street to avoid. But Mary was telling him something different. She was telling him people finally saw him, the real him, not the reputation, not the assumptions, not the fear. The man beneath the leather vest. Jack nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Mary." Mary patted his hand. "You're a good man, Jack Morgan. Don't ever forget that." She turned and headed back toward the kitchen, leaving Jack alone with his coffee. He sat there for a long time, letting her words settle over him. For the first time in years, Jack felt seen. Months passed like pages turning in a book Jack never expected to read. The days grew warmer. The trees outside the diner filled with green leaves. The highway stretched long and familiar beneath his tires every time he rode back to the place that had changed everything. Jack made the trip every few weeks now. Sometimes he stayed for an hour. Sometimes he stayed all afternoon. The diner had become something more than a stopping point on a lonely road. It had become home. On a bright Saturday morning in late spring, Jack parked his motorcycle in the gravel lot and walked toward the front door. The bell chimed as he stepped inside, and Mary looked up from behind the counter. "Right on time," she said with a grin. Jack smiled. Coffee ready? Always is for you. He settled into his usual seat at the counter and wrapped his hands around the warm mug Mary set in front of him. The diner was busier than usual today. Families filled the booths. A group of teenagers laughed near the jukebox. The whole place hummed with life. Jack was halfway through his coffee when the front door flew open. Jack! He turned just in time to see Emma running toward him, her face bright with excitement. Her hair bounced in a ponytail. Her sneakers squeaked against the checkered floor. She carried a certificate in one hand and waved it like a flag. Rachel followed close behind, smiling as she tried to keep up. Emma skidded to a stop in front of Jack and held up the certificate with both hands. Look, I got an award! Jack set down his coffee and leaned forward. Let me see. Emma thrust the paper toward him. It was decorated with colorful borders and gold stars. In the center, printed in bold letters, it read, Emma Carter, Student of the Month. Jack read it twice, then looked up at Emma. Student of the Month. That's a big deal. Emma nodded so hard her ponytail swung. Mrs. Henderson said I worked really hard this month. She said I help other kids when they don't understand the math problems, and I finished all my reading assignments early. Jack felt pride swell in his chest. That's amazing, Emma. I'm proud of you. Emma beamed. Rachel reached them and rested a hand on Emma's shoulder. She's been talking about showing you all morning. Jack glanced up at Rachel. I'm glad she did. Rachel smiled warmly. We both are. Emma bounced on her toes. And guess what else? Mom signed me up for art class. I get to paint and draw every Thursday after school. Art class? Jack raised an eyebrow. You like drawing? I love it, Emma said. I made a picture of a motorcycle last week. It looked just like yours. Jack grinned. I'd like to see that sometime. I'll bring it next time, Emma promised. Rachel pulled out a chair at the counter and sat down beside Jack. Emma climbed onto the stool on his other side, still clutching her certificate like treasure. Mary appeared with 2 more mugs of coffee and a hot chocolate for Emma. I heard someone got an award. Emma held up the certificate again. Student of the Month! Mary clapped her hands together. Well, that deserves a celebration. How about a slice of pie, on the house? Emma's eyes went wide. Really? Really, Mary said. Apple or cherry? Apple, please? Mary winked and headed toward the kitchen. Emma kicked her feet against the stool and took a sip of her hot chocolate. She had whipped cream on her upper lip, and Jack handed her a napkin without saying anything. Thanks, Emma said, wiping her mouth. Rachel watched them both and smiled. She talks about you all the time, Jack. At school, at home. She tells everyone about the man who helped her. Jack shifted in his seat. I didn't do much. Rachel shook her head gently. You did everything. Emma looked up at Jack. Mom's right. You saved me. Jack met her eyes. They were clear and bright and filled with trust. He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Emma finished her hot chocolate and set down the mug. Then she slid off the stool and tugged on Jack's sleeve. Come on, she said. I want to show you something. Jack glanced at Rachel, who nodded encouragingly. He stood and followed Emma across the diner. She weaved between the tables, her small hand wrapped around his. She led him toward the back corner, where the booth sat beneath the window. The same booth where Jack had been sitting the day Emma had run into the diner. The same table where she had hidden beneath his boots, trembling and afraid. Emma stopped in front of the table and pointed. Jack looked down and froze. Mounted on the wall beside the booth was a small wooden plaque. The wood was polished and smooth, and brass letters were engraved across the surface. It read, "Reserved for Jack Morgan, the man who proved heroes don't always look like heroes." Jack stared at the words. His throat tightened. Emma tugged his hand again. Mary made it. She said this table is special because it's where you protected me. She said everyone should remember. Jack couldn't speak. Emma looked up at him, her eyes shining. I'll never forget, Jack. Ever. Jack stood frozen in front of the plaque, unable to pull his eyes away from the brass letters. His chest felt tight. His hands felt heavy at his sides. Emma squeezed his fingers. Do you like it? Jack swallowed hard. Yeah, kiddo, I like it. Emma smiled wide and tugged him back towards the counter. Rachel watched them approach, her expression soft and knowing. Jack sat down again, and Emma climbed back onto her stool. Mary returned with a thick slice of apple pie topped with vanilla ice cream, and set it in front of Emma. Enjoy, sweetheart, Mary said. Emma picked up her fork and dug in immediately, humming happily as she ate. Rachel turned toward Jack. Mary told us about the plaque last week. She wanted it to be a surprise. Jack shook his head slowly. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Rachel replied. You've already done enough. Jack looked down at his coffee. The steam curled upward in thin wisps. He thought about the first time he walked into this diner. He had been alone then. He had been tired. He had been running from a life that felt empty. He had only wanted coffee and a quiet moment before getting back on the road. That was all. But then Emma had burst through the door, terrified, lost, looking for someone to see her, and Jack had seen her. He had not known that moment would change everything. He had not known that protecting one frightened little girl would give him the family he thought he had lost forever. Emma finished her pie and wiped her mouth with a napkin. She looked at Jack with bright eyes. Are you staying for lunch? Jack glanced at Rachel. Rachel smiled. We'd love it if you did. Jack nodded. Yeah, I'll stay. Emma clapped her hands together. Yes, can we sit at your table? Jack raised an eyebrow. My table? Emma pointed toward the booth in the corner. The one with the sign. It's your table now. Jack felt his throat tighten again. All right, let's sit there. The three of them moved to the booth. Emma slid in first, then Rachel. Jack sat across from them, his back to the window. The wooden plaque hung just above his shoulder. Mary brought menus, and Emma opened hers like she was reading something important. She studied the pictures carefully, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Rachel leaned back and looked at Jack. She's doing so well, better than I ever hoped. Jack nodded. She's tough. She learned that from you, Rachel said quietly. Jack shook his head. She already had it in her. She just needed someone to believe her. Rachel's eyes glistened. You gave her more than belief, Jack. You gave her safety. You gave her a voice. You gave her hope. Jack looked at Emma, who was now asking Mary about the grilled cheese special. She was smiling. She was confident. She was no longer the terrified child who had hidden beneath his table months ago. Rachel continued. And you gave me my daughter back. Jack met Rachel's gaze. I'm glad I was there. So am I, Rachel said softly. They ordered lunch, and the three of them talked and laughed while they ate. Emma told stories about school. Rachel shared updates about her new job. Jack listened and smiled, feeling the warmth of their presence settle deep inside him. This was what family felt like. Not blood. Not obligation. Just people who chose to show up for each other. After lunch, Emma walked Jack outside to his motorcycle. Rachel followed a few steps behind. Emma looked up at the bike, then at Jack. Will you come back next week? Jack crouched down so he was eye level with her. I'll always come back. Emma threw her arms around his neck and hugged him tight. Jack wrapped his arms around her small frame and held her close. When she pulled away, she looked at him seriously. You're my hero, Jack. Jack felt his chest tighten. And you're mine. Rachel placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. Say goodbye for now. Emma waved. Bye, Jack. Jack stood and nodded to Rachel. Then he climbed onto his motorcycle, pulled on his helmet, and started the engine. The road stretched out ahead of him, long and familiar. But this time, Jack wasn't riding away from an empty life. He was riding away knowing he was no longer alone. The little girl he had saved had helped him find a family, purpose, and a new home in the hearts of others. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.